can be no more than 1,000 characters, but I also declare that logic to validate the form. So we will create a list of errors, and then let's just show you right here where we did it a number of episodes ago. We'll just steal this to save some time. Paste it in. All right, so that will automatically import our validator. And we can say, all right, we're going to validate that the body, that text area, meets our criteria. And again, notice as I'm doing this, this is one pain point that we might want to solve. We are now repeating validation logic. So I can see here, for example, that the body for a note can be no more than 1,000 characters. But I also declare that logic here. So you can imagine situations where it becomes out of sync. For this form, your body logic is different than for that form. So yeah, these are things I want you to think about, where you have little pain points and little pieces of duplication that could eventually become out of sync if you're not careful. So in your head, I want you to be thinking about, what could I possibly do to normalize that, to isolate it so that I only perform this validation logic, or whatever the logic happens to be, in a single point? Okay, that's something to think about. But for now, we will keep the duplication. One thing at a time, right? All right, so finally, if there are no validation errors, or another way to think of it is, well, if we do have validation errors, then we need to reload that form. So for now, I'm just going to return the view. But again, later, we will learn about a process where if validation fails, you redirect to a specific controller. But again, we're not quite there yet because we haven't yet talked about sessions and things like that, and flash messages. So for now, I'm just going to return the view directly. So once again, notes/edit.view.php. I'm going to send through the errors. I will once again send through the heading, but again, we have some duplication there, which is annoying. And then once again, we will pass through the corresponding note. All right, so This is what we get. Otherwise, if there are no validation errors, we can update the record. So we can just run an update query, db query. And here's how we can write that. Update the notes table, and I'm going to set the body of the note equal to whatever body we have in the bound parameter. But which one? Well, I can say where the ID of the note equals, and once again, another parameter. Okay, so the ID I care about is post ID, and the body will be the body that the user typed into that text area, like so. Okay. Okay, finally, that text area, like so. Okay, finally, we're all done here. So the last step would be redirect the user. All right, so why don't we, for now, just redirect them back to all of the notes. So I can say header, location equals notes, and then we're done here, so I can die. And yeah, I want you to notice a few pain points as we worked on this. As you'll find later, once you graduate to certain frameworks, we can simplify so much of this logic. Things like this, error handling, checking for errors, there are ways that we could simplify that dramatically. There are ways to remove this duplication. Obviously, in real life, you're not hard coding the current user. So just keep in mind, there are further ways that we can simplify this quite a bit. All right, let's give this a shot in the browser. So I'll give it a refresh. Here's our note, and I'll say has been updated. We update it. Oh, and it just worked. We didn't even have a mistake there. So I click on it, and that's what we have in the database. Let's confirm it. If I switch over to Table Plus, there we go. Okay, but now what happens if I switch back if we fail the validation? And just to make this a little easier on me, why don't we make the validator like if it's more than 10 characters, something that will instantly trigger a validation error. Okay, well now this alone would trigger an error. So let's do this. Gibberish here. If I update it, all right, well, we have a couple of things here. Yes, we do see the validation error. And remember, we got that for free because we copied our view. So you'll see right here, just to make sure we're all on the same page, we already had this check from our create form where we say, all right, well, if there is an error for the body, then let's display it as part of a paragraph tag. But also I want you to notice that this is kind of annoying, potentially annoying. You type in something here, it does trigger a validation error, but when we update it, it reverts back to what you originally had. And there might be situations where you want that, but usually you don't want that. But I'm going to hold off on fixing this again until we learn a little bit more about sessions. Okay, so just hold tight on that one. Otherwise, though, our validation does seem to be working just fine. If I tweak something that kills the validation, well, we don't update the database at all. Instead, we return to the form and we provide the user with a bit of feedback. So this seems to be working pretty well. Okay, and then further, if we try to edit this, but the authorization fails, and we can test this out by just manually updating this like that. Well, now the current user has a different ID. So we try to authorize it and we see, wait a minute, the current user did not write this note, so they do not have permission to update the note, in which case we will forbid it, as you see here. Okay, so all of that seems to be protected. All right, and I think that completes our first resource. Okay, you know what? I want you to really focus on the conventions that we're following here. If you can, try to adopt them. And maybe that means taking out a sheet of paper right now and copying these down so you don't forget. So index will show all of a resource. Give me all notes. Show will show me a specific note. Create will show me a form to create a new note. Store will be what we hit after you submit that create form. So this is responsible for storing the note, for persisting the note. What else do we have here? Edit shows a form to edit a note. Update is where that edit form will submit. So that controller is responsible for updating a specific note. And then, of course, destroy is responsible for destroying the note, removing it from the database. So notice these conventions are being followed here in each of our controller names. And then we also mostly adopt that as part of our URI. The only thing that's missing here is really, rather than /notes, we would do something like /notes/ and then some kind of ID. And then when you update it, you would hit that as well. But we haven't yet talked about routing wildcards, and that's the only reason why we haven't adopted this. But we can talk about that in the future. All right, and yeah, that does it for your first initial CRUD app. And by the way, if you're not familiar with that term, CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. And that's exactly what we've done here. And yeah, if you think about it, so many of the things, so many of the tools on the internet really do break down to simple CRUD operations. For example, with our notes, create a note, read a note, show me the notes, update that note, or delete this note. What about a to-do app? Create a to-do, show me my to-dos, delete this to-do. What about maybe an invoicing app? create a new invoice, update the invoice, show me all my invoices, delete this one. Again, so many things break down to simple CRUD applications, and that's why we reviewed it here. Okay, but now, finally, in the next episode, we begin a brand new section where we can discuss session handling and authentication. I hope you're excited. Stay tuned. All right, everybody. We have now reached a brand new chapter on session handling and authentication. And real quick, before we get started, I'm not trying to be condescending, but if you've made it this far, seriously give yourself a pat on the back. You deserve it. This is dozens of episodes, hours and hours of content, and you're still here. And most people give up very, very quickly. So it's super admirable. You're doing a great job. I promise we'll get to the other side. So yeah, let's ease into this new chapter by talking about what exactly are PHP sessions. So why don't we begin by looking up the general definition of the word session. And yeah, I'll point you to number 2, a period devoted to a particular activity. Nice and simple. Okay, so within the context of a website, it would be a period where a user interacts with your website. And their interaction is going to be different from my interaction. So this is my session, this is their session. Okay, that's good enough to get us started. So let's go into our project here. And yeah, let's just play around. I'm going to go into the index controller for the home page. Now, you've learned about superglobals. There's a post superglobal, there's a get superglobal, there's a server, there's a request. There's also one related to sessions. And this will take the exact same shape of $_session. And we can interact with it as an array. So why don't we start by putting my name into the session. And real quick, I will warn you, this isn't quite going to work the first try, but I still want to do it this way so that you have a better understanding of why we must do one step prior to this to get everything working. Okay? All right, so now think about it. I now have a session, an interaction with this website that is unique to me. And this data here, these attributes, will be remembered as I browse the website. Now, I'll tell you right now, it's not permanent. We're not saving it to a database, so it is temporary. And often that session will be deleted, for example, when you close the browser. Or even if you don't close the browser, depending upon the defaults, it might delete after half an hour or a day. It just depends. But again, that is a key thing to keep in mind here. It is not permanent. Sessions are not permanent. Okay. So yeah, we can just try this out though. When I visit the home page, I'm going to put something into the session. And then when I go to the about page, I want to grab that information out of the session. So why don't we do this? Let's just die and dump, and let's see if I can grab the name out of the session. And let's see if that works. All right, I'm going to go to my browser. Okay, so now, at least we think, we've put my name into the session. So now when I go to the About page and we try to fetch my name out of the session, Does it work? No, it doesn't. We get undefined global variable session. Okay, well, I just told you this exists, so what is going on here? Okay, well, here's the issue. Anytime you intend to work with sessions in your application, the first thing you have to do is start up the session. You can't interact with that superglobal until you have started the session. And generally, you want to do that as early as possible. So why don't we do it in index.php? You know, it doesn't have to be the first line, but just for now, let's put it right up here at the start. I will call a function session start. Okay, so with no other change, let's give it another try. I come back to the home page, we give it a refresh, we started up a session, we then put my name into the session, and now when I go to the about page, we fetch it out of the session. Another try. I come back to the home page, we give it a refresh, we started up a session, we then put my name into the session, and now when I go to the about page, we fetch it out of the session. Okay, so this is pretty cool. We now have data that can effectively persist from page to page. And again, it's temporary, it doesn't live forever. So in fact, let's just try this. Let's close out my browser entirely. And yeah, I've reopened Firefox from scratch, and sure enough, all of that prior session data has been destroyed. So again, I don't mean to reiterate, but this is a key thing to understand. Session data is temporary. Okay, great. So let's go back to the home page where we put something into the session, and then when I go to the about page, we can grab that data. All right, so let's do this. Let's go back to our about controller and get rid of this die and dump call. And instead, I want to echo the person's name within the view, maybe within the banner. So we'll go into Views, Partials, Banner. And yeah, at the moment, we are dynamically displaying a heading. But yeah, just temporarily, let's swap that out with hello, and then I will reach into the session and grab the person's name, just like that. All right, so let's go back to the browser. And refresh, and sure enough, I do get hello, Jeffrey. And refresh, and sure enough, I do get hello, Jeffrey. And that will persist across every page for the lifetime of my current session. So just keep in mind, once again, if we close that Firefox and bring it back, we get a warning. And of course, if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, this makes perfect sense. Think about it. Within index.php, we started a session, and then we hit our about controller. That loaded a view. The view loads a banner, and then we tried to fetch name out of the session. But at this point, there's nothing in the session because when I closed the browser before, it was destroyed. So now we're starting from scratch. And yeah, PHP is saying, you don't have anything. In the session for name. The point where we put it into the session is within the home page. And you may not always load the home page first, of course. So yeah, notice if I go to home, then we put Jeffrey into the session. It gets saved on the server and as a cookie on the browser, and I'll show you that in just a minute. And then for repeated page requests, it is remembered. So yeah, in plenty of situations, what you'll need to do is check, well, is this available? Otherwise, use the default or render something different, like guest. Hello session name or guest. Okay, so now my name is in the session, so we say hello Jeffrey. Once again, let's restart. We reload. Once again, my name is not in the session, so we see hello guest. For every single page until we update the session with my name. And then that is what we will reach for. Okay, so now how exactly does this all work? What's going on here? All right, well, there's a couple pieces to this puzzle. First up, I want you to right click and go into inspect is fine, but really I want to go to storage. And then you'll see session storage, but don't be confused here. This is actually part of a JavaScript API. We actually want to have a look at the cookies. So there's two pieces to this puzzle. We are going to store a file effectively on your server, and that file contains your session data. And then we will also store a cookie on the browser side. And this communication is going to be essential for determining whether to start up a new session, how the data is communicated, etc. All right, so let's have a look. And yeah, sure enough, I can see one cookie for this website. And notice the name of the cookie, PHP Session ID. And then there's the corresponding value. And we can also see important information about when it expires, what the domain is, the last time it was refreshed, which is really important. Yeah. So let's bring this down, and I see hello, Jeffrey. But what if I just right click and I delete all of them? So let's delete all my cookies. And then I come back and give it a refresh. And now I see hello, guest. Okay, so that's a key thing to keep in mind here. If I delete the cookie on the browser side, well, the next time I reload the page, basically what's happening is that cookie is not transmitted, it is not sent to the server. And because it's not sent to the server thinks, okay, well, I just need to wire up, I need to whip up a brand new session. So once again, we're starting from scratch here, and I'd have to repeat. And there we go. Here's our cookie once again. Okay, so that's the client-side piece. The server-side piece is basically a file is being stored on your server that contains information about the session. Okay, so what I think would be cool is if we could figure out where that file is being saved. And it might differ depending upon your machine. Usually the default is going to be some kind of temporary temp directory on your server. But yeah, again, whether you're on a Mac or Linux, or a PC, it might be a little different, and you might want to Google for 5 minutes to figure out how to find this file. I'm going to run PHP and then the info flag, and this will spit out a lot of information related to my current server. So yeah, now I want to figure out what is the path to where these session files are being saved. And I just happen to know it's called session.save path. Yeah, there it is. Now, in my case, it's set to no value. On your machine, it might be the same, or it might just tell you exactly where that path is. And if that's the case, simply copy it and CD to that directory. Otherwise, if there's no value set, then it defaults to the default. And that default is, again, the temporary directory. So let me see on my computer where that is. I'm going to echo, and again, this is probably unique to Mac. But I'm going to look for temp directory. All right, and this is it. So let's see if I can go directly there. All right, and you can see I am ordering the files according to the date. And sure enough, I see these various session files. And these are the ones we care about. So how do I know which one we want? Well, let's go back to Firefox. And just to make sure this is up to date. Yeah, so I can see one where the session ID is this. It starts with U82K. All right, let's come back. And there we go, session U82K. Okay, let's drag that into my editor. And there we go, name is Jeffrey. Okay, so now we know, this is pretty cool. Now we know when you write to the session, those attributes and that data is literally being written to a file on your server. Let's try another one. Let's go back to, actually, let's just stay on, how about contact.php, and I'm going to write something else to the session. How about, we'll do my last name, Way. Okay, let's come back to Firefox, and we'll go to Home, About, Notes, Contact, and yeah, at this point, our session should now have 2 keys, name and last. All right, let's come back. Let's return to that session file, and there we go. We wrote to the session, so it was updated within that session file on our server. Okay, and now we can see, if I bring this back to storage, cookies, yeah, again, eventually these will expire. I don't remember what the default expiration. It could be minutes, 30 minutes or something like that, but you can tweak it. Otherwise, though, it could go longer. It will immediately be destroyed, of course, when you close the browser. So how long it lasts can depend on a few variables, and that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, otherwise, when we write to the session, we will constantly update the last time the session file was updated, basically. And that way, you don't have a situation where you're browsing the site and then randomly, everything got deleted and you lost all of your session. That's not going to happen as long as you keep it active and you keep starting up the session. All right. So yeah, this is interesting. We have two pieces to the puzzle. We have a session file and then a cookie that is stored in the browser. And if that cookie is deleted, if you've ever heard somebody say delete your cookies, well, let's just go ahead and do it. Delete the cookie. And now when we start up a new session, well, we don't send a cookie to the server. So PHP picks up on that and it says, okay, I'm just going to start up a new session. And notice that this one has a different value. So if I go back to my Finder, notice that, well, yes, we still have the old session file, and we'll talk about that in the next episode. But yeah, now, because the cookie was deleted, it created a brand new session file to store this data. Okay, so I think that's enough for now, but we still have so much more to cover. Again, this is a whole chapter on sessions. So it will conclude with us building a login system. But for now, I just want you to get comfortable with the general practice of starting up a session and writing to it. And in the next episode, we'll figure out how to destroy a session and what steps you should follow whenever you do that. I'll see you then. So how about we'll do my last name, Wei. Okay. Let's come back to Firefox and we'll go to Home, About, notes, contact, and yeah, at this point, our session should now have 2 keys, name and last. All right, let's come back. Let's return to that session file, and there we go. We wrote to the session, so it was updated within that session file on our server. Okay, and now we can see, if I bring this back to storage cookies, yeah, again, eventually these will expire. I don't remember what the default expiration, it could be minutes, 30 minutes or something like that, but you can tweak it. Otherwise, though, it could go longer. It will immediately be destroyed, of course, when you close the browser. So how long it lasts can depend on a few variables, and that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, otherwise, when we write to the session, we will constantly update the last time the session file was updated, basically. And that way, you don't have a situation where you're browsing the site and then randomly, everything got deleted and you lost all of your session. That's not going to happen as long as you keep it active and you keep starting up the session. All right. So yeah, this is interesting. We have two pieces to the puzzle. We have a session file and then a cookie that is stored in the browser. And if that cookie is deleted, if you've ever heard somebody say delete your cookies, well, let's just go ahead and do it. Delete the cookie. And now when we start up a new session, well, we don't send a cookie to the server. So PHP picks up on that and it says, okay, I'm just going to start up a new session. And notice that this one has a different value. So if I go back to my Finder, notice that, well, yes, we still have the old session file, and we'll talk about that in the next episode. But yeah, now, because the cookie was deleted, it created a brand new session file to store this data. Okay, so I think that's enough for now, but we still have so much more to cover. Again, this is a whole chapter on sessions. So it will conclude with us building a login system. But for now, I just want you to get comfortable with the general practice of starting up a session and writing to it. And in the next episode, we'll figure out how to destroy a session and what steps you should follow whenever you do that. I'll see you then. All right. Hey, everybody. So in the last episode, you had your first introduction to session handling, right? Sessions 101. But now let's kick things up a notch and figure out an actual practical use case for sessions within an application. All right, let's get going. If I open my routes file, yeah, of course, we will build a form to register a new user. So let's start with the routes, and we'll keep it very simple. This will go into a controllers directory.